Welcome back to Bringing More to the Table. I'm Shelley. Today I'm going to be making a caramel toffee squares. These are delicious and I'm sure you're going to love them. So our ingredients today for these squares are 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 1/4 cup of granulated sugar, and 2/3 of a cup of softened butter. So the first part of this is a 3-part recipe. So the first part is the bottom is the crust. So I'm going to get started here. I'm going to put my flour into my food processor. If you don't have a food processor, you can mix all 3 ingredients in a bowl until crumbly, and then you'll put them into your baking dish. So first of all, we're going to put our 1 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour into the mixer, into the food processor, 1/4 cup of granulated white sugar. Now I am going to put the lid on and give this a mix before I put the butter in. And you're just going to pulse this just to get a little mix. Like that. That's it. Okay, and now I'm going to put my butter in there. And I've cut my butter up just so it's in pieces, just so it's a little bit easier for the food processor to mix it up. This is going to bake in the oven at 350 degrees once it's all mixed together for 15 minutes. Okay, so we're going to get this back in here, put the lid back on, and then I'm just going to pulse it. I'm not going to blend it. I'm going to put it on pulse just so I can get it mixed nicely up. So here we go. Oh, it's not on there, right? 1 second here. I must not have my lid on properly. That's one good thing about these machines. If you don't have your gear on right, okay. So just give it a few pulses around. Once I get this done, I'll be back and I'll show you how to get it into the pan and get it prepared for the oven. Okay, so I've got my crust here all mixed up, except for that piece of butter that got stuck, so I'll just put the lid back on and give that a quick mix back in so that that gets all incorporated. There are no big chunks of butter in there. That's all you do is you just pulse it, and then you get a nice shortbread crust. Okay, so I'm just going to take that off there. Turn the power off. Take the blade out. And your crust, you're just going to take it, pour it into the pan. Very simple. And then a little trick, so you don't have to use your hands or your fingers to spread this out, is just take a measuring cup or whatever you have, something small, and you can just push it down. And then that way you're going to get a nice even crust. And that's all you do. Now this, once I'm done, this just goes into the oven for 15 minutes to bake. And then once this is baked, you can start your next part of your squares. And that's going to be the toffee. So as soon as I get this done, I'll be right back to show you it's going in the oven. So now I'm going to put this in the oven at 350 degrees for 15 minutes. And then we're going to come back and I'm going to get started on the caramel toffee. Now the ingredients for the caramel toffee are 1/2 cup of brown sugar. This is dark brown sugar. 1/2 cup of butter. This is salted. You can use margarine if you don't have butter. 1/2 cup of sweetened condensed milk and 2 tablespoons of corn syrup. So I'll see you in a few minutes when I'm getting that into the pot. Okay, so I'm going to take my shortbread crust out of the oven for my squares. They've been baking for 15 minutes at 350 degrees. Now these do fluff up quite nicely. They're very hot. So just set it on a wire rack and it's just going to sit there and cool. And we're going to make the caramel now. So I'm going to get everything into my pot. And once I get it into the pot and get it going, then we're going to come back and I'm going to show you how the toffee looks. So let me get my ingredients into my pot here, and then I'm going to put it on the burner on a medium-high heat, stirring it constantly, keeping an eye on it because it will burn. It is caramel and sugar and all the good stuff that does burn. So let me get started here. So 1/2 cup of brown sugar, 1/2 cup of salted butter. You can use margarine. 1/2 cup of the sweetened condensed milk. Just pour everything right in the pot. No fancy way, just put it all in there together. And then we're going to put in 2 tablespoons of corn syrup. I'm using light corn syrup instead of the dark, but you can use whichever you have or whatever you can get in your area. Okay, and 2 tablespoons. And this is quite a nice caramel sauce. It's very light and delicious. It's not heavy and sticky. I mean, it's sticky, but it's not a heavy caramel. It's a very nice caramel tasting. Okay, so 2 tablespoons. And I'm just going to bring it over here, get it onto the stove, turn my burner on to medium-high. And then we're going to let this melt, all come together and get it going. Now, once you get this to the boiling point, you're going to want to be stirring it constantly for 3 minutes. And then you take it off the heat and stir vigorously for 1 minute. And then we pour it right on top of our crust. And that has to sit on top of the crust on the wire rack for at least 30 minutes before we put the next layer on. So I'll see you in a couple minutes. Okay, so I've got my caramel going here. Everything in the pot is incorporated. As you can see, it's already starting to look nice and caramelly. It's the sugar's melted, the butter and the milk, and it's all coming together quite nicely. Now be very careful. This is very hot once it gets going. So you just want to make sure you're stirring it continuously because you don't want it to burn or stick. And once it gets to the boiling point, it is going to be able to burn very easily. So please make sure you're stirring it as much as possible. And don't leave your pot for a second because that's when it will burn. So you can see it's starting to get hot, it's starting to bubble up here. So I'm going to stir this on medium heat. I'm just going to turn my heat down a little bit at about a 5, so half your temperature. And you want to stir this for 3 minutes continuously once it's boiling. And then 1 minute off the heat and then right on to the top of your shortbread crust. And then that needs to cool for 30 minutes before you put the chocolate topping on there. Okay? Okay, so my time is up. It's boiled for 3 minutes and I'm stirring it for the last minute. And as you can see, it's thickened up quite nicely. And one thing too you can tell by your caramel is if your pot or your burner is too hot, you're going to get dark little chunks in there. So you want to be really careful of that as well. So now this is just going to go straight onto my crust. Let's get all your caramel out of there. And like I said, you let this sit for 30 minutes and then we're going to put the topping on, which is just chocolate chips. And I've got chocolate chips, milk chocolate, and semi-sweet, half a cup of each. And we're going to melt those with 1/8 cup of butter. And then that just gets spread right on the top of this caramel. And then you're going to let this sit to cool for at least 4 hours. And then you're going to want to put it into the fridge as well. And you'll have delicious caramel squares. So you can see it's already setting up. It's very nice caramel. Okay, so that's it. That's all to our caramel squares. So that's the first two parts. The last part is the chocolate on the top. So I'll see you when we're ready to do the chocolate. Okay, so I'm ready to do my chocolate for the top of our squares. So what I have here is I've got 1 cup of chocolate chips and milk chocolate and semi-sweet chocolate chips and 1/4 cup of salted butter in this. Now you could use margarine if you don't have butter. Unsalted butter you might not want to use just because the flavor won't be quite the same as using salted. So in the bottom of my pot I just have some water in there, and this is called a double boiler or a bain-marie. So all this is going to do is the water is going to simmer underneath our bowl and it's just going to melt our chocolate and butter together. So that's all we're going to do. We're going to let this melt and come together nicely. And then we're going to put it on top of our squares here. So as you can see, my caramel has cooled and it's quite nice. It's all firm and it looks beautiful. So once that's done, we're gonna get this all melted up, and then we're gonna pour it on top, and then we're gonna let this cool for a few hours, put it in the fridge, and then you can cut it into squares. Okay, so my chocolate and butter has melted. It's all come together. So as you can see, it's nice and melty. I'm just gonna take that bowl right off there, and I'm gonna get the rest of the chocolate out of my whisk, and I'm gonna put this right onto my caramel and spread it evenly over top of that. And then you just let that cool. Now it's best to let this cool for at least 6 hours in the fridge before you cut it or serve it for company. So I'm just gonna give this a nice little mix up here. And as I said, this was milk chocolate chips and semi-sweet. You can use both, or you can use one or the other. But I like the flavor of both of them together. So right on top of your caramel, just put it on there. And then you're gently going to spread this over top of your squares here. All right, and that's all you're gonna do. And then once this is done, it's going into the fridge. Perfect. And be gentle because the caramel is still soft, so don't scrape it too hard. You do need to be gentle with this. And you'll have a nice thickness, maybe a quarter of an inch or so. And you want to work kind of quickly as well because the chocolate does start to solidify. So you'll want to get this done as quick as possible. Okay. Make sure you get it on all the corners. Give it a nice... Okay, so I'm going to put this in the fridge. Once it's cooled and ready to be cut, we'll show you how it looks. Hope you try this recipe, like and subscribe, and enjoy. Thank you very much.